Today I thought I'd take a look at the BX Oberhausen, which is an emulation of the Oberheim SEM. But I thought what'd be interesting is to compare it to the existing SEM emulation, which is the Arturia SEM V. I've got the Arturia, it's what actually is my favourite Arturia instrument, this, and I've got the iPad version as well, and I'm really fond of it. I think it gives a really nice sort of rattly sound. But do I need the BX Oberhausen, the Brainworx version? Well, let's take a look, shall we? I'll just give a brief overview of them for anyone that doesn't know them. They're both based on the SEM, as I say. We've got the VCO1 and VCO2, same over here. The VCF is the SEM multi-mode, which moves from low pass through to notch and then through to high pass nice and smoothly with a band pass in there. This does exactly the same and works in exactly the same way. It's nice actually when I'm trying to set up the sounds in this, that here we've got you can see there it's 432 Hz, 980, 587, you get a readout there, and in this you get a readout on the SEM, you get a readout in the bottom left hand corner, so makes it quite simple to emulate the sounds. Well, you'd think it'd make it quite simple, but actually it's a little bit more complicated than that because the envelopes are different. Minimum attack on the Arturia is 0, but on the BX, on the Brainworx, it's 4.36. Doesn't sound like a lot, but once you start doing various sounds, if you're modulating the VCF with the envelope 2, you can hear the difference, and maybe it makes it a little bit more close to the original. I don't know. They've both got the two oscillators which you mix in the VCF section, so you mix between a sawtooth and a pulse on each of the oscillators. You can't have a sawtooth and a pulse with them, so that's the same on both of those. They both have an extra LFO. This can be a sine or a square, and on the Arturia it can be a sine, a square, or a ramp. The main difference from a synthesis perspective is that the Arturia has this sub-oscillator where it can be a sine, a ramp, or a square, and you can alter the pulse width on it. It can be 1 or 2 octaves below. You don't have that on the Brainworx version, but you do have this pan spread. The Arturia also has noise, so you can mix between sub and noise in the same way as you mix between the sawtooth or the pulse. They both have oscillator sync, but this also has FM. The Brainworx also has this TMT, which I think is tolerance modeling technology. It essentially has different tolerances for the components for the different VCOs, so you do get different sounds by turning this on and off. The Arturia doesn't have that, but when I'll play later with the LFOs and stuff, and you can hear that there are differences between the two voices on the Arturia as well. One big omission from the Arturia is unison mode, which I think is a real shame because I do use it quite a lot on the OB6 as well. So let's have a listen to the Brainworx. Arturia. And now they're both in mono mode. Let's put the Brainworx into 8 voice unison mode. Just can't do that on the Arturia, which I think is a real shame. They both have an effects section, an arpeggiator, and a modulation matrix. On this, we have a keyboard follow, which you can assign to all sorts of different parameters, and you can change how it affects it across the width of the keyboard. And a nice thing on this is that on the Arturia is the 8 voice programmer, so you can change the sounds of each of the 8 voices. You can sort of tweak them slightly. If I just show you that quickly. So let's load in an initial patch, just a sawtooth wave, let's load that in. So if we listen to the different 8 voices, put this on VCF frequency, turn that down. So you can do that with all different things as well. So let's have a look at the resonance. Let's do something similar with that. So that works quite well if you've got arpeggiators, so you can, or just a single note. The Brainworx doesn't have that, but it has a more flexible arpeggiator. On the modulation sections, we have 9 modulation routings on the Brainworx, and you've got 9 sources. On this, you only have 8, but the 9th on the Brainworx is the keyboard follow. And these tend to, from what on the Arturia, the amount tends to increase a lot more than it does on the Brainworx. But the Brainworx, you can adjust how the knob interacts with the sounds, whether it's a parabolic, a square, or linear, you know. So slightly more flexible from that standpoint. And there you can see all the different routings you can take it to. Again, similar amount, maybe even identical on the Arturia. And the effects section, we have overdrive, chorus, and delay in the Arturia. And in the Brainworx, we have this airband that's based on the MAG or MARG EQ. Have an overdrive, digital delay, but we also have a flanger and a reverb and a chorus. And these you can swap these around. So they're both really similar, except for things like the sub and the FM and the pan spread, TMT, mid-side VCF adjustment. LFL1 can sync on this one and it can't on the Brainworx. So an initial inspection, these are really close. As I say, I own the Arturia. I really like the Arturia. Do I need the Brainworx as well? To me, it's going to be about what it sounds like and what I can do with it. Should really mention as well that they're both resizable. This Arturia gets absolutely huge at 200%. It's massive. It really looks quite nice, but this is a 27-inch cinema display, so I don't know what size display you'd need to fill this up, but a bit of a whopper. And the Brainworx doesn't go quite so large, but perfectly big enough. If I put that on my 23-inch next to this, it fills it up. On a laptop, that's more than ample. After playing with these for a couple of days next to each other, they do sound really similar, so I don't want to spend too much time looking at frequency analysis or oscilloscopes. So let's take a really quick look at the filters. Not a lot in any of that, as I say, so don't really want to dwell on it too long. But we'll just quickly show you the Sawtooth and how similar they are. Okay, so here's the Brainworx. And we can see that's just tickling the sort of 10k there. And this is the Arturia. And it looks almost and sounds pretty much identical, doesn't it? Quick look at the oscilloscopes then. So Arturia on the left, Brainworx on the right. They look very, very similar, don't they? For completeness, let's have a look at the pulse. This is the Arturia going from 10% to 90%. So pretty much the same on both ends. And let's have a look at the Brainworx. That's a lot tighter down at 10%, isn't it? Not much in it though, but Brainworx, I suppose, has that one, as it can go a little bit thinner. Whether that's what an SEM does, I don't know. So having a quick listen to a Sawtooth. Now, if you've seen any of my other videos, my Jupiter 8 video perhaps, or the Mini Moog, and I think also on the SEM shootout, which I looked at the Arturia and the OB6 as well. I've color coded this so you can see which are playing. I've compared against the OB6 as well because it is SEM inspired and Tom Oberheim was part of the team that developed it. But really just to show how well these plugins sound as compared to like a synth that's worth like £2,500. So the yellow is the Brainworx and the orange is the Arturia and blue is the OB6. Nothing in that, is there? Play some chords. Again, I couldn't really tell you any difference in that. So then I thought, well, I'll move on and I'll add some envelope to the VCF. And this is where things got a little bit more complicated. As I was saying, the actual attack and decay times are completely different on these. And even if you get them matching and say, you know, this one says 581 there, and this is now 581 all the way around there, or just gone past. The Arturia goes to a maximum of 14 seconds, and the Brainworx is 21.5. So there's a big difference there. But trying to match them up, even if you get the exact times, it doesn't quite sound the same. So this took me quite a while, this, but you'll hear again, sound really, really close. So that's the OB6. That was the Brainworx. And that was the Arturia. And again. And So then I thought, well, let's move over to using that Sawtooth and using that as a pad, and then modulating some of the frequencies. And the way I've done this, just to show you, is I've used automation to make sure I'm getting pretty much identical on each. So that's the top here is the Oberhausen, the Brainworx. On the next track down is the Arturia. So you can see I'm trying to get sort of pretty much identical. So let's have a listen. Here's the Brainworx. I think there's a little bit more resonance on the Brainworx, but again, you hear more differences. The more complicated you make a patch, the more differences you just tend to start to hear, which stands to reason really if it's going through more processing. And here is the OB6. So I think the soft synths stand up really well to that. Don't forget, nothing at the minute has got any chorus or any reverb or any effects at all on this. It's just the raw oscillators going through the filters. And interestingly, just show you this as well. This is the Brainworx with the TMT turned on. I've had it turned off so far. And it adds a little extra texture there, doesn't it? It sounds like a sort of little bee flying through the sound. Compare it with this one. That little bee's missing. But I'll play you a little bit more of those in a minute, actually, because I'm not entirely convinced it works really well with the synths. It might work really well with the console emulations, but not necessarily when you've just got a few oscillators you're playing with. So I took that sound and thought, well, I'll modulate that using an LFO. So this is the Brainworx again. So that was using LFO1, and you can hear it synced. Although actually you can't sync LFO1, but I've synced it just using the frequency. It's 120 BPM, so just stuck on 2 Hertz. So that syncs it up perfectly. And now this is with the TMT on again, so each of the voices LFOs slightly different. Now that's completely different to this, isn't it? Because they've got independent LFOs playing now. Trying that on the Arturia. Now that's using LFO2 and that syncs perfectly. LFO1 you can sync as well, but using LFO1, the Arturia seems to have different values for each of the voices on the LFO, a bit like the TMT. Have a listen to this. So perhaps Arturia have modelled LFO1 on the Oberheim LFO from the SEM, and LFO2 is just a standard LFO they've thrown in. Anyway, so you can get sort of different sounds from each of them using the LFOs. I thought I'd try that again on the OB6, just out of interest. So that's just using the standard LFO. It's not quite as definite as this on the Brainworx or this on the Arturia, but it is synced well together. And the other option you have on the OB6 is use the modulation matrix and use voice 2 as an LFO source, so putting it on low frequency. So you've effectively got a different LFO for each voice. Sounds horrible on this, but it does have its uses in other things. Well, there you go. LFOs are quite flexible on all of them. They've only got a couple of waveforms. This isn't one of those synths that you have like 7 different waveforms for the LFOs, because that's not what an SEM is it? So what is a sort of unique SEM sound? I think something that uses the notch filter, obviously. And I've put in here a sawtooth and a pulse, and the pulse is modulated on VCO2. So let's have a listen to that. And I'm just sweeping through the frequencies. And here's the Arturia's version of that. And now to the hardware, the OB6. Here I think the OB6 sounds a lot different to the other two, actually. Listen to the Brainworx again. Arturia. They're quite similar, and now the OB6. Possibly not doing the PWM as much in there, maybe. So after having a little play around, I thought, well, let's try and emulate some of the sounds from the Oberheim on the Arturia and some from the Arturia on the Oberheim. So I started off with this one. It was called Asia on the Arturia. I've changed it slightly because the modulation settings were slightly different. But just to give you an idea of how they sound together. So Arturia, Brainworx. Again. So from that, I thought, let's make a little pluck sound and just ignore one of the oscillators. So this is just a simple pulse wave modulated using envelope 2, the Oberheim. Arturia. Oberheim. So again, making things really close. Brainworx. And the Arturia again. Not much in it. So I thought, well, I'll turn that into a little poly pluck. So just add a little delay in there because I could. They are slightly different, but again, that's why I added the delay thing, so that once you hear it in a mix, so similar. But as I'm playing with them, I do feel like there is slight differences in them, in that the Arturia seems a bit more rattly. I don't know if that's a sort of good way of saying it, and the Oberheim seems a little bit more sort of controlled, perhaps a little bit more polished. I don't know, but I quite like the roughness of the Arturia, so that's in no way a criticism of it. And now what I've done is I've taken that same plucked sound and I've done with the Brainworx what you can't do with the Arturia, and I've added a little bit of FM in there. So And you just can't do that on the Arturia. Let's just play with that a little bit more. Love all that. I'm a really big fan of FM. Never used to be, but really like that rasp in there. So move over to the Arturia now. We can add a sub. So you can't make this sound on the SEM, on the Brainworx, and you can't make this sound on the Arturia. And just a little bit more about that TMT. Here it is on, just playing a simple chord, and I left the TMT on, and you'll hear that each chord, that each stab sounds slightly different. It's as if there's two separate stabs, plays 1, 2, 1, 2. Let's hear that. It's like the filter's closing on every other stab. This is it with it off. Exactly the same sound. So as I said before, I'm not a massive fan of the TMT on this. I think it's sort of a bit weird. It sounds like your synth's broken. And why does it do it on alternate chords? Obviously something to do with the voice allocation, maybe. And I tried that on a number of sounds and it was doing the same, so I don't think it's because that sound in particular. But worth noting, I thought. So having just had the go at the Brainworx about the TMT, I'm now going to play you its pièce de résistance, which is this pan spread that it does, which Brainworx do so well. So it's got a pan spread on each of the oscillators, and it's also got this mid-side operation of the filter. Now this is just a simple pad made with a Sawtooth on VCO1, a Pulse on VCO2 that's been modulated with LFO1. And I've used the notch to make it pure sort of SEM sound in beautifulness. Really nice, that, isn't it? Had my mixer set at mono earlier on and it sounded a bit weird, thinking this is not doing anything, this spread, it's completely rubbish. Turns out it's not. It's really, really nice. So this knob here, this changes the filter to go into just the mid or just the side. Let's put it at the side, add a bit of resonance on the edges, and you should hear that left and right change, but the center image doesn't. Works really nicely with the low pass, doesn't it? And let's change it now so only the center image is being modulated by the VCF. And in the extremes of your left and right aren't going through the filter at all. So let's maybe add some effects to that. Let's add a bit of chorus, shall we? Let's add a bit of that air band as well. So these are the sort of things that you can't do on the Arturia. I'll just see what we can do. I'll see if I can stick some chorus and delay on it and see if it gets anywhere similar. So here we go, let's start it off on the notch. It's really nice, that, isn't it? It hasn't got the stereo field you get from this. But I've not added any effects yet, so let's try that. Let's add some effects in. Let's add a nice bit of chorus. It's getting there. It's not exactly the same effect, but it's not far off. Let's compare that with the Brainworx again. On the Arturia. Nice as that is, I have to say, I do much prefer the Brainworx. And particularly from my perspective, is they're the sort of sounds I really like to make, and the Brainworx is better at those. So in conclusion, which one? Which one do I like the best? Difficult to say, but I think I'm leaning towards the Brainworx, mainly because of the FM and all this pan spread stuff. It's absolutely gorgeous. You know, if you've got the Arturia, do you need the Brainworx? Of course you don't. They're so similar on so many things. And if you were going to buy one, you know, the Arturia bundled in with everything else is just an amazing deal. So we'll see how much this Brainworx costs when it comes out. Will I be buying the Brainworx? I've got the Arturia, I've got the OB6, I've got the Fuse box, that's got an SEM style filter as well. But yes, of course I'm going to be buying. Of course I'm going to be buying the Brainworx. It's beautiful. It really is beautiful. Lovely polished sound. That's taking away nothing from the Arturia. I do like the sort of raspiness of the Arturia and the sort of dirtiness I think you get out of it. But the Brainworx, it's going to add to my sonic arsenal, as they say. Hope that was of some use to someone somewhere. Thanks very much, and see you next time.